Deadlock is the new Valve, occult noir, MOBA, hero shooter, movement shooter, fighting game, and it's in early development. And it's not just okay, it's good. Hello! Hi! Hey! Ah! I'm Skeleton Honey. The majority of the waking hours of my life have been spent playing video games, and this one might be my favorite yet. After over 1,000 hours and over 1,000 games, I feel like I'm ready to start talking about the game more formally and giving critiques on certain parts of it. However, this video doesn't really come naturally to me. Please critique this critique, and let me know if you'd like to see more of this in the future. This isn't a tier list, or a meta-analysis, or a guide. I'm not a pro player.
You're literally horrible. I'm talking to you guys at home. This is the reason you're still losing. With that being said, that pretty much wraps it up.
However, I am naked.
I'm actually a playtester.
Posted on the forums many times, and Lash still doesn't have a melee passive. The first thing I feel passionate enough to talk about is the item rework update. The shop rework update. Deadlock's item system is one of the first things I grew to love about the game. It felt like any hero could fulfill any sort of character archetype if you built the right items. Especially coming from other games with building systems like League of Legends, it felt like the shop in League of Legends is just there so that you can accidentally build the wrong things and make your character suck. An unfortunate majority of the skill expression in that game is deciding in what order to build 6 of 10 viable items for each hero, or legend, or champion. What are they called? However, Deadlock is maybe the most skill-expressive game I have ever played. There's movement, there's shooting, there's abilities, there's teamwork, there's positioning, there's MOBA macro elements, economy, and building. And building was just one beautiful little part of this game that was fun to mess around with. But as the game keeps evolving, however, it feels like building and economy is ever more important every single patch. It feels like every month that goes by, the fights are less about who is actually better at piloting their character and who is more up to date on what items are good and bad. And I think the shop rework is really when it flipped a switch from you could feasibly make any build work to there are now 2 sets of builds. Stuff that does work and stuff that just doesn't. Lots of this critique is pretty negative, but there's still lots to love about Deadlock and lots I still love about Deadlock. It's still my favorite game to play. And so before I really start going ham on the game, just so you know, there's a massive update for Deadlock that just came out. 6 new heroes are showing up. They revamped the main menu into a hub. There's lots of updated visuals, both for heroes and the map. This game is really unlike any other in that it is like every game you've played combined into one. There's really something for everybody to love in this game, I guarantee you. Even if you don't enjoy the amalgamation, you will still enjoy one of the parts very much. So please, I urge you to try it, and now is probably the best time in a long time to try.
Anyway, back to all the stuff I hate!
It's hard to overstate how much I enjoyed the building in this game. I'll literally wake up in the middle of the night to come onto my computer. Like I'll literally get out of bed to make builds. I still enjoy building. It's just when I'm done with my build, it's a lot harder to imagine actually using it in a game and having any fun and not just getting stomped the entire time. The builds I make are purely theoretical now. None of them are actually practical. It's unfortunate that deviating from the path of meta even slightly guarantees that you're going to be ineffective compared to your contemporaries. And I think the shop rework is the reason why. I remember thinking that specialists would get better, and I was correct. I didn't realize how bad of a thing that would be for me personally. Once the luster of the new Crushing Fist item had worn off, and I was forced to contend with the most oppressive concoctions of the competitive-oriented players, I realized that my days of fun in the sun were over. I've always enjoyed specialized playstyles for sure. Melee Lash is not really something I ever saw people do with a whole bunch of success. Or at all. So I think even when I was at my peak, I don't think I was secretly doing something mathematically dominant and it was just flying under the radar of the meta. I think I was just doing something a little different and I was finding some success with it because the build system of the past allowed for that creativity. You weren't punished so severely for building off meta as you are now. You were able to have fun and be effective. Partially to illustrate my point, up until this month, my most common MVP rating on TrackLock was #1. Some effectiveness calculator was putting me as the most effective person on my team more often than not in my games as Punch Lash, up until literally this month. Just to clarify, Most of my MVPs are pre-shop rework. The shop rework was like 3 months ago. You know, you got by for 3 months. No, I had farmed up a bunch of MVPs, I guess, playing Punch Lash. And now I'm not performing as well.
My goat's
getting less MVPs.
You fell off, bro! You fell off!
But I'm just trying to illustrate the point that you could play off meta and still be effective in your games. There were a lot of really good changes for the shop rework update. Obviously, the visuals are a massive improvement. I mean, I personally liked the airport bathroom stall sort of aesthetic. The simple designs appeal to me as someone that draws lots of simple shapes. I'm a simple guy. I like little shapes. What can I say? I think it's a big step up over the MOBA standard of little nondescript weapon or piece of armor in a larger gray or black box. And they pop up when you mouse over them and they make noise. It's very cute. The aesthetic changes to the shop are obviously all very good, and I've got no complaints. But I do think that the shop rework changed things in such a way that it will be more difficult for people to have fun, not just old players, but new players as well. Firstly, just going back through the list, full shop rework including many new items. This is a statement I read in multiple ways. Many new items is almost an understatement, because even with items that didn't change, they did make a blanket change to all items to simplify them in their stats. It was the case before the shop rework that items would have bonus stats. They'd have a primary function, and then they'd kind of have a secondary function. Even the tier 1 items would have the main thing, plus they'd have a little bonus. You get your toy with your cereal box. For example, close quarters, a tier 1 gun item, gave you bonus damage when within a certain range, but it also gave you a little bit of bullet resist. Had a little bit of toy with your cereal. Play a little game, why don't ya? Pretty much every single item had at least 2 stats. Plus the tree-specific bonus, such as extra spirit, weapon damage, or maximum health. I really liked this aspect of Deadlock's building because there was more than one reason to build an item. And I think a great shame of simplifying, and also, let's just hold the phone, okay? Hang up. Wrong number. There's nothing simple about Deadlock's building. And I don't think any MOBA should be aiming to quote-unquote simplify their building mechanics for many reasons I will get into, but primarily just because it's impossible. I don't think anybody that plays Deadlock is looking at the shop now and thinking like, oh, well now it's just, you know, you read this and it's just easy, you know? I didn't know things were so simple. Frick, if you had that 40 extra bonus health on my close quarters items was really putting a gear in my brain that shouldn't have been there. And I couldn't get my head around it before, but now that there's 4 less weapon damage on my extra spirit, woo! I can see clearly. I can see clearly now. I just never remember the complaints for the game being like, oh, well, I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to build. I'm trying to do gun damage and I build spirit and it doesn't work. Like, what is like the most popular type of video right now? Oh, here's the meta analysis. Here's what items are strong. Here's what you should be building. It's obviously not simple enough that the market for those videos have disappeared. So I wouldn't consider that problem solved, personally. You can make it intuitive by naming things intuitively, like close quarters, and having the stats reflect the name. But I mean, ultimately, it's reading stat lines and doing math. That's never not going to be complicated. It doesn't matter how simple, quote unquote, you make the building system, there's always going to be required reading for MOBAs. There's, 100 items. The skill floor didn't go down at all. The skill ceiling did. This simplification is an overcorrection, because as I stated previously, there was still a cereal box. The extra little stats on every item, in addition to the tier bonuses, made it so that even picking at random, you could create a build that would be mostly effective for most characters. I think that is not true anymore. I think picking at random, you will almost certainly create a build that, when compared to a mathematically calculated and curated, quote-unquote, competitively viable build, you won't hold a candle to the inferno that some of these people have been able to cook up. So essentially what I'm saying is that the gap between the best and worst builds have widened because there's only ever one reason to build an item now, because most items do one thing and one thing only. You may not even get investment reward for spending the money anymore. And min-maxing was always a thing, but there's an objectivity to the power of items now that didn't exist before, because it's so easy to just check the math from item A versus item B because they each only do one thing. And just so we're clear, Deadlock actually does this beautiful thing of showing you what your stat changes will be buying certain items. It's less about you actually doing the math yourself and more about you knowing every single item and what to build at that point in time. It's not any easier for the new player. However, it is easier for an experienced player to build a mathematically superior build that will stat check everybody else in the lobby. Deadlock is a very complicated game, so this critique in particular doesn't really hold up super well. I think you can very easily argue that the complexity of all the gameplay elements of Deadlock, the macro elements, the 6v6 format, each with a unique non-mirrored hero ability building even. There's enough going on in this game that regardless of any single individual element of the game being out of tune, there should be enough going on that it shouldn't be breaking the game. However, I don't really ever remember feeling heroes and their builds were legitimate DPS checks. They will run at you relying on the fact that their build is going to do more damage than you can respond to. And it didn't feel possible to get that sort of dominance through building before. It's not that building wasn't skillful before, it feels that the skill of building supersedes the skill of doing basically anything else. A powerful build is a baseline for even participating in the game of Deadlock anymore. Of course, another counterpoint to this part of the critique is that everybody is getting better at Deadlock just generally. You know, the baseline skill level for your average player is rising. And so the easiest way to stay on top is to just watch your weekly YouTube video on what is overpowered. And so I know that that's probably where a lot of that comes from. I was building niche on purpose, and lots of people were building niche on accident, and now a majority of the people are building competitive on purpose. It's less that you couldn't get ahead before, and it's more par 4 builds is much closer to maximally effective than previous. I think it's truly a shame that a game with so much skill expression would promote so much uninteractivity. Some builds are just so strong that it's worth disappearing into the jungle for 15 minutes to get ahead so that your build circumvents all skill. I know it's a MOBA, and generating gold or souls or whatever have you is very important, and I don't think that that needs to change, but the fact that it is basically the most important thing in determining whether or not you get a kill or don't is pretty disappointing. For a game that has multiple vectors in which you express your mechanical skill, the most important vector for whether or not you actually succeed in the game being something outside of mechanical skill is pretty bizarre, and I think it's going to turn a lot of people away that put a lot of investment into lots of skills being undercut by people that just watch more YouTube than them. So many builds are just in a yelling contest trying to maximize their DPS against other builds doing the same, that it doesn't really matter how interesting the thing is you have to say, because everybody in the room is going to be talking louder than you. And nobody's going to hear your regen maxing build. Tier bonuses were also reworked. Instead of getting a flat amount per item, it's now non-linear. Now we have a Dark Souls fucking soft cap, hard cap, money investment. How's a new player going to know when to stop if they want to build a generalist build? How are they going to know what the soft cap is? It's not less complicated, so it must only be there for balance sake. It's like that was their one curb against people abusing the most abusable system you could have come up with. Speaking of the most abusable system you could create, item slots are now universal slots. The enemy of art is the absence of limitations. One problem introduced by universal slots rather than tree-specific slots is that there's a new balance issue introduced. Previously, the development team only had to balance so that a 33% slot investment early game and a 50% slot investment late game into a single tree was balanced. They could get away with one tree being a little bit stronger than another one, and it wouldn't turn into a hero-wide gun meta, because at the end of the day, half of your slots were devoted to the other two trees. Now, the dev team has to balance so that early game, 100% of your slots can be devoted to one tree, and late game, 100% of your slots can be devoted to one tree. God forbid we have a really swingy meta where it's nothing but gun builds into nothing but spirit builds, seesawing back and forth till we're all throwing up. I wonder how that could have happened. Okay, not very many people were building all of one kind of item. We did have a swingy meta where it was either all gun items or all spirit items and then some green items to support, but you know, I think the point still stands. Having the tree-specific slots, whether intentional or not, put a nice fence around what was possible for the min-maxers. It was still possible to buy all of one kind of item before. You know, you'd see the charge shot Grey Talons buy 8 spirit items and nothing else. You're not preventing anybody's fun by reverting the changes and putting those safety nets back on. The only type of person's fun that you're preventing is the type of person that is actively seeking to strip the game of all of its enjoyable elements in favor of a build that produces green end screens instead of red ones. It also says that item costs are now discounted when you own the component, but I'm pretty sure it always did that. So I don't know why they made a specific note of it. Dear God, he's naked! With the reduction in slots, all the items became just slightly more powerful and more expensive. So it just sort of compounds the fact that your build decisions are more important. Too important, in my opinion. I think Deadlock has a lot of elements that would attract people that don't typically play MOBAs and keep people around. The game's movement depth is only rivaled by something like Apex or Titanfall. The hero abilities and interactions are as interesting as Overwatch or Rivals. And I mean, you still have lots of characters and opportunity to flex mechanical aim skill like CS or Call of Duty.
Did he just say duty?
And there's still so much to be said about how important positioning is and macro elements. I mean, all of this stuff is so important. The balance is slowly approaching something that's reasonable. I think there's lots of characters, heroes that are still completely miserable to play against. And there's obviously lots of heroes that have stayed powerful with high win rates for a long time. Things are getting better. I don't think we need to revert to dedicated slots. And I feel like most of my frustration just comes from reverberations in the meta that haven't quite fully settled yet since the shop rework update. There's still some abilities and certain items that might need looking at. I think in lane, especially, it's just kind of who can use Quicksilver or Cold Front the best for spirit heroes, and then things like Resto Shot and Backstabber, you know, flat value items are always fluctuating in the early game and usefulness, and it's pretty unsatisfying. The lanes are pretty stale, so I think especially in the early game, items need to be looked at. However, number of slots, I think we could probably go up to 2 extra, you know, maybe 10, and then unlock 4 for a total of 14. It feels like it's too hard to build items for preference with so few slots. On certain heroes, it's especially as somebody that builds melee. Early game, if I want to build all 3 melee items, that's half of my available slots. So I don't know. I think 2 more would feel pretty nice. So, what was the point of the video? It's a critique. So I'm just sort of yapping. Speaking of critiques, critique my video right now in the comments. Was this good? Was this bad? Should I make more? I want to make more, but you can let me know what would make future videos better. It would be awesome, thanks. I'm still gonna make the gameplay videos. Those are tons of fun. I unfortunately got caught up in making this because I'm not very productive and I'm super dumb. Actually, super duper stupid. I'm sort of like, all right, never mind. It wasn't the 4-hour critique that's promised, but I plan to, you know, make smaller, more concentrated, focused versions of these so it's a little more sustainable given my unproductivity. I hope you're enjoying the new patch. I don't know if I really like Lash all that much. I might make a critique on Lash as a whole, including the redesign. Would be maybe my next thing to talk about. You know, have fun. Vote for me, class president, me! Love you. See you next time. Have fun.
Ha! Skeleton Honey, brought to you in part by thank you to all my members
And subscribers.